So we have been just seeing the discourse around all of the pricing as it relates to Switch 2, the hardware, and especially the games. And a lot of people have been asking us, well, how do you think Nintendo is reacting on the inside to what is happening with all the fans yelling about price? So we're going to talk about it here.
Yeah, this has really become the story of the Switch 2 as of today. And again, things are happening so fast, we always have to timestamp these videos.
Yes.
It is 1 o'clock
on
Pacific
Thursday,
time.
April 2nd.
On Thursday. And I was really surprised
April
this
3rd,
morning.
sorry. April 3rd.
I was really surprised this morning when I turned on the Treehouse Live and saw Mario Kart, Donkey Kong, and Metroid, which all looked amazing. But every comment in the chat was, drop the price.
All caps, drop the price.
The whole duration of the Treehouse Live.
And I thought, oh, maybe they'll do this for a little bit and then you can shift the conversation back to how great these games look,
Right.
whatever. But no, for the duration of the entire stream, that was it.
Right, and it felt like yesterday this conversation was sort of bubbling up and people were starting to understand the full pricing plan because it was confusing.
Yeah.
And it just exploded today of
really
people
did.
being really unhappy about this. And like, I don't want to try and blow things out of proportion, but this does feel like a true crisis moment for Nintendo.
It does, and it's the thing that you don't want to happen when you reveal new hardware and new games. You want people to focus on the cool things that you're showing about Switch 2, the cool things you're showing about all these games, and it becomes a crisis when everyone's attention is on this whole other thing and it's giving it a very negative spin. So we're going to talk about sort of what happened. We're going to talk about what Nintendo is likely doing right now inside the company as they wrap their heads around this like becoming a real crisis and what could possibly happen next. So I guess like let's just recap because it's a little confusing.
Real fast, we'll go through what's already happened.
How did this happen?
How did we get to today? Yes. So the Switch 2 Direct happened yesterday. The price, any pricing information was notably omitted.
Correct.
Some of it appeared later in a press release. Some of it appeared later on the Nintendo.com site. Some of it appeared later on retailers. It was all over the place.
A mess.
There was no one clean place to get pricing information. But as people started to piece it together, it's like, oh, this is a very expensive proposition in terms of hardware, games, accessories, you name it.
Yeah. So obviously it was intentionally omitted from the Direct for a reason, but handled poorly in terms of the information being in all these different places, and you're expecting the fans or the consumer to piece it all together.
Right. And it just shows some disrespect to the consumer,
Exactly.
where it's like, oh, you just saw the Direct, you're so excited, you're just going to throw your money at us blindly. You're not going to even ask the question of how much it costs because you're so excited, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a little bit like degrading almost
Right.
to the intelligence of the consumer.
Right, but no, like that is part of the normal shopping process of, oh, I'm interested in something, how much does it cost?
Right.
And now I've had to do all this legwork to piece it together, and guess what? Now I'm mad.
And it's expensive.
Yes, oh my gosh, it's expensive, and you made me do this, and I'm doubly mad.
I'm very mad.
Yes.
So I think there is a little bit of sticker shock around, the $450 price tag for Switch 2, but there is conversation around the hardware price itself, talking about how, in 2025, looking at some of the comparisons, looking at some of the prices, thinking about inflation, thinking about these kinds of things, maybe we can stomach the $450 hardware.
This is always what happens. It's like, well, here's the actual price of every piece of hardware after inflation, and maybe it's not so bad, but kind of making things very murky in the hardware sense is like this week has been all these talk about tariffs and, oh my gosh, the tariffs, how many percent? And, specifically talking about a tariff going to Vietnam and China where the Switch 2 is being made.
Right.
So there's a lot of uncertainty. I've yet to find the very clear explanation.
I don't think there is one.
What is the impact on this device? Is this device about to go from $450 to $700?
Yeah.
Nobody really knows that. So there's
Right.
just a sense of anxiety of, oh my gosh, this thing that is already expensive is going to be so far out of reach for most people.
Right.
That's one part of it.
Yeah.
Then there's the software angle.
That's the one part that I think people are even more mad about, is the software angle.
Which, again, I think the single most shocking thing out of this whole conversation is Mario Kart World coming in at $80, which is obviously a lot more than Nintendo has ever charged for a game. That's more than Sony charges for the latest great God of War, Naughty Dog, like all of their
AAA prestige titles,
very expensive, very prestigious titles. It's like, no, we're going above and beyond that. And that is a truly shocking and unexpected thing that, again, they just buried information-wise after the Direct.
Yeah, that wasn't even in the press release.
No.
That was actually buried on the website for the game, and you have to scroll all the way down, past all of their great trailers, past all the things they want to like market to you about what is great about this game, and then you kind of feel like, oh, my goodness, are you burying this price because it's high?
Right. So those are the things we know, and then there's slowly been information trickling out, like these Switch 2 edition games. Like it sounds like if you want to get a physical edition of the Kirby, plus that expansion, that's going to be $80.
Yes.
Or the physical version of the Zelda games on Switch 2. Wait, those are $80 too. But meanwhile, there's still things that we don't know. Like how much is the welcome game that should be a pack-in?
The tech demo?
That's paid, but we still don't know yet how much. So it's a very murky situation.
Murky situation.
And this is all happening while Nintendo has just been completely silent.
Yes, so Nintendo,
on the topic.
As of the time of the recording of this video, Nintendo has had
said literally nothing new.
Public communication in response to these questions about price. They're also hosting a media event yesterday. So right after the Direct ended, they had a number of media attend hands-on for the Switch 2. At the event, the attendees were asked not to ask about price.
Yes.
They were in a developer roundtable with the three people that hosted the Nintendo Direct, and it was very clearly stated to them that please do not ask any questions about the political state of things, and also they are not answering any questions about price.
Right. Yes, we just spoke with Stephen Totillo, who was at that event, and we have a whole video with him coming tomorrow, so you should check that out too. But yeah, it sounded like that was just a very sort of off-limits topic, and even if you went up to somebody from Nintendo, they were like, well, the price information is out there, and that's kind of all we have to say about it.
Exactly.
Okay?
Keep it locked to Nintendo.com.
Yes.
It's what the people at Nintendo are saying at this media event, whilst all of this drama is really happening around them.
Now, the fact that the information is so scattered far and in between across so many different sources has led to this interesting phenomenon of misinformation popping up. So you walked in the door today and said to me, what's the deal with Mario Kart World Physical being $90?
Yeah, I was seeing that area. I was seeing it across a lot of news articles. But you know what? I usually do this, and I was so wrapped up in...
You were a victim of misinformation.
Usually I try to trace the source.
Yes.
Because I try to be responsible
I was scrolling Facebook, as I do every morning. And
I was on the phone with my boomer friends. No, just kidding. And on a landline. And usually I try to do my due diligence of like tracing the source or whatever, but there was just so much information coming out yesterday around all of this stuff that it was hard to keep I was having a hard time, and I'm like very plugged in. And it was a lot of confusion around things like, is physical versions of games even more expensive? There was already rumors and speculation going around about these Switch enhanced games like you were talking about. There was so much, varying degrees of like, oh, these are going to be $10. No, these are going to be $30.
And for a while it seemed like Japan was giving out the pricing, but not the America. So again, like globally, is this coordinated or synchronized at all?
Right.
And again, like the $90 thing is like, are people kind of in there doing some mental math of like, well, after a tariff hits, it's going to go from 80 to 90. I don't really know. And maybe there's even more to that we have not been completely plugged into.
Right.
But it very clearly says on the Nintendo site, $79.99, which is $80 and is not $90.
Right. But the problem is one of the consequences of Nintendo being completely silent in all of this is that they are enabling the story to get out of their hands, out of control.
Right.
So now there's going to be...
They have lost control of this.
Right. So now there's going to be misinformation, and now you have to do even more work as Nintendo to correct that misinformation.
Look,
so that's going to be really tough for them to do.
They have every possible channel out there to say whatever they want to say about the price. They could put it out on social media. They could put it out on Nintendo Today. They could do an interview with somebody in the media. they have endless options, but they have chosen to say absolutely nothing, which is very interesting.
Yeah, so this all leads to just, speculation about Nintendo's pricing strategy in general. Like, people have been asking the question, is $80 the new standard?
Right.
Is the Switch enhanced games all going to be paid? What does it mean for NSO subscribers? What does it mean for physical games? Like all these unanswered questions just sort of bubble out there now, and they've been so they've been silent. So there's no one to correct any of that speculation.
No, and again, people have been looking at a sheet of the games that have been announced with prices, and they're like, well, I guess we're back to 1996 when some games, big cartridge games were upwards of like $90, and other stuff was on discount, and that was cheaper. It's just like the Wild West.
Yes.
Again,
chaotic.
Like nobody understands. Nobody's been able to ask Nintendo, why is Mario Kart $80?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me? I would like to know.
Yeah.
Nobody's been able to ask that very simple question.
Exactly.
So we just have to go off the information that we have, and it's human nature that people will make assumptions about why that is in the absence of an actual fact from the company.
Exactly. The other thing that you and I were thinking about a lot, and definitely because we worked with these two people and we went through...
We should say, if anybody doesn't know, we worked previously on the communications team at Nintendo.
Yes.
We're part of all sorts of these conversations,
yes.
So it's particularly of interest to us.
Right. And thinking back to our time working at Nintendo, launching, lots of different kinds of hardware from the good and the bad. We worked with under Reggie and Mr. Iwata, and they were very consumer-minded people,
yes.
I would say. Famously, when 3DS wasn't doing well, Mr. Iwata took the pay cut, dropped the price. Reggie was one of the ones advocating for Wii Sports, for example, to be a pack-in game to show like the promise of Wii. They're thinking about these things not from a pure business perspective, like how can we make as much money as possible, but like how can we make like a happy consumer base that will become lasting fans.
Right, but also thinking like pretty logically about like how will the consumer react to this?
Exactly.
Versus, well, it's Nintendo, so they will want it no matter the price, so jack it up as high as you want.
Right.
And yeah, like, it's not just us. Like, a lot of people have been pointing that out where, and it's fair to beg the question of like, well, who is having that role at Nintendo now of really kind of trying to be an avatar for the audience, thinking about how the audience is going to react, thinking about how that impacts your relationship between Nintendo and the customer. It just seems like that role is gone at the company.
Yeah.
There's literally nobody doing that. Because otherwise somebody would have raised their hand and said,
like, maybe we should think through this a little bit more.
Either we shouldn't do this, or here's another way of how we have to very, logically roll it out.
Yeah, the reason, the why Nintendo hasn't been very transparent about this, the reason why there has been nothing from Nintendo, which leads to a lot of confusion, is because there's nobody in that role thinking about, well, how is the consumer going to be reacting to this? How can this confuse the consumer? And since no one there is thinking about that, here we are now. And I guess, the last thing here is like, lots of other companies in the games industry really look to Nintendo as an example. Especially as they come off a very, successful hardware generation. So when they look at Nintendo as an example and they're seeing Nintendo's way of pricing things and the way that they're handling this situation, it begs the question of, what they're going to be doing with their pricing models and what's going to happen to the future of the games industry in terms of pricing in general. So just not a good precedent, I think, as a company that has a lot of respect in the industry to kind of do this, because you're kind of enabling other companies to have poor practices as well. And that's
everybody's pointed out Grand Theft Auto being, the extreme example of, well, they're going to price that at $100. But if I'm Sony today and I'm saying, well,
Mario Kart.
If they're going to price Mario Kart at $80, like I'm working on this Naughty Dog game that's going to cost me like hundreds of millions of dollars. Like let's go. Let's do this. Let's go. And I think a lot of people like are really doing analysis of like, wait, can we actually get away with this?
Exactly.
I mean, people just got comfortable with $70 as the bar, but I guess this is the new standard here.
Yeah.
And things you can just imagine like a slippery slope situation from that standpoint, which is concerning. And again, I think people always assume like, oh, Nintendo's the one company that wouldn't do this stuff.
Yeah, they make their games accessible.
Right.
They make their hardware accessible to everybody.
They make things for everybody. They have these big groups of kids and families who they look to serve. Even Mr. Furukawa in his recent quotes, he was saying like, well, there's a lot of things that we take into consideration with pricing, but we always want to make it approachable to these people. And it just seems like that. Are we talking about the same thing here? Because that didn't happen.
That kind of went out the window here.
That didn't happen.
Completely out the window. Yeah, exactly. So because we were at Nintendo for so long, we've worked in these situations before. We've been in these kind of crisis situations in the past. We wanted to kind of think about how is Nintendo's reaction to what is happening right now. And they're literally in the midst of
This event is still happening.
The event is still happening.
Yes.
They're in New York. The teams are there, trying their best, I'm sure, to do the actual list of things that they need to do that day to keep the event going. But yeah, there are certain things happening within the company. They're obviously not blind to the situation, so there are things going on. One of the things that we were joking about is this thing called the War Room that Nintendo usually has at these types of events, and for these big sort of moments, they have this war room, and we were joking around and saying things like, oh gosh, this is the worst place possibly to be, but there actually is a purpose to the war room, is that their job is to look at what is happening out there, what are people saying, what are people thinking, what is the reaction, and come up with any solutions to any issues. So they're basically not doing their jobs at all right now, because obviously the stuff is burning down around them in terms of this conversation and confusion around price. They're definitely very aware of the situation, but in terms of any solutions they have provided, that ain't happening.
Right, they've done nothing so far. And that's a question that we see sometimes is does Nintendo even know what's going on and what's happening? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Yes.
And especially during an event like this, there are so many reports that are constantly being made, reports upon reports, piles and piles of reports that they sometimes feel redundant, but people still want the report. They want as much information as they can get.
Yeah.
And those look at things like social media or traditional media coverage, and they're analyzing it from a lot of different angles. So they absolutely have a down-to-the-minute read on what people are saying, what people like, what people don't like, what are opportunities for them. And they're just saturated with this information, and now they have to make a decision of what do we do now?
Right. What do we do next?
We understand that people are unhappy with the pricing structure.
And confused.
And confused. So we have an opportunity to do something, but what do we do?
Right.
What do we do?
I do think that they are a bit surprised by how severe this reaction is. Now, I will say that they knew very well going into this that this was going to be a point of contention.
Right. Not completely surprised.
Yeah, not completely surprised, because they omitted it from the direct for a reason, because they knew that this is going to become a point of contention that may distract people from the things they were announcing in that direct. So they omitted it for a reason. But I think that they thought that they could sort of kind of steamroll through that.
Yeah, the games are going to be so cool and the system's going to be so cool that people will just it's not what I wanted, but I can live with it.
Or they'll see Mario Kart, shown in a Treehouse live in detail, or a media person will play Mario Kart and be blown away by it and be like, yeah, it's totally worth $80.
I suspect that the strategy for yesterday was, we have Treehouse Live, and that'll give people a deeper look and a deeper understanding of this game. So let's not rush to do anything until that has happened. But now they got, bam, right in the face with the drop the price for a whole day of programming that they had the comments on, and they had to look at that. It's embarrassing for them. That's really hard for the people that are on that.
They're failing at the point of Treehouse Live, which is to get people more information about the games and get them interested and excited and be focused on it. Right. They've lost that.
So that was your next idea. That has failed. What now?
Exactly. So there likely are working on some kind. There's definitely. We were on the comms team, so if I were there's going to be a recommendation of hey, we do need to put out something official from Nintendo about this. We have lost control of the narrative. So the recommendation is from the communication team, I suspect, is we need to put something official out there. Let's work on a statement. But the problem is now they are kind of like bad at doing this now because they haven't had a need to do a lot of crisis communication for 8 years.
They just don't talk to anybody.
They also don't talk to anybody. It's like
and when they do,
yeah.
it's a very like throwaway response. Like here's your answer, leave us alone. It says nothing.
Yeah, there's not a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the statement, now we're going to shut the door in your face.
Right.
Which is not the case right now. You're going to need to have deeper engagement to like clear up some of this misinformation and miscommunication. And so that is just hard for them to do.
Right.
Like it's going to be so hard for them to get any kind of statement approved. Imagine the approval process for this. How many people
they're going to have to go to Mr.
it?
Furukawa.
Mr. Furukawa needs
But before
to review.
him, many other people along the way.
Oh, it's like 20, 30 other people along the way.
Lawyers, developers, people in different regions, you name it.
Yeah, business people,
executives.
Yes.
And then finally it's going to go up to him, and he's in a whole completely different country and time zone.
And he's probably busy with some other stuff.
Right. So it's not going to be, I think like maybe tomorrow is going to be, or late today, which would be Japan's morning would be the earliest. They could
try to get it to Mr. Furukawa
that they could do something. But again, they have every means at their finger. The reason that all those people are there in one place is so that you can make a fast decision and do something. At E3, we used to do this all the time. It was like, oh,
somebody's confused about this
There's
thing?
a misunderstanding about the feature of this game. That developer is here. Come shoot this video. We're going to put it on social media 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah, we used to do that all the time.
Right.
But since they're so out of practice doing this, and they've really like shut themselves away from this kind of public-facing message, they're out of practice.
I also wonder if they need to rewrite some of their messaging, because I wonder if some of their messaging was so just like hand-wavy that hopefully they realize if that's the case, it's like, this is actually going to make people more mad.
Right.
And we might need to say something a little bit different. And again, you're starting from square one on a process that is very long. Of how do you get something public on a big meaty topic like this approved? It takes a long time at a place like that.
Exactly. And the other thing is that they haven't had to deal with these kinds of negative issues for a really long time. Mm-hmm. So they've lost sort of this like almost like scrappiness and flexibility around decision making and around changing around their plans. They said yesterday in that Nintendo Direct that they will have a Mario Kart Direct on April 17th. Now you and I were talking like, is there something in that Mario Kart Direct maybe? More information about the game, more information around the scope of the game that could potentially justify
probably
an $80
There's probably
price
something
tag?
that would help.
Could they not move that up
and
just tell us now so that we don't continue to churn on this stuff? Like there are ways and things to do, but because they're so out of practice in doing this and being flexible like we used to when we were at E3s all the time and we were out there in the public, every week, every month, because they're so out of practice, they can't even like wrap their heads around, oh, we should change this strategy. Let's be flexible and like move this announcement up a little bit and share this detail now. Mm-hmm. And to your point, they have every means to get that out to the same audience, right? And they haven't been able to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also been curious to note, and we've been keeping track of how long it's been since Doug Bowser had done a public interview. And it was like a year and a half, somewhere between a year and a half and 2 years. And I think we thought that going into this event, they would proactively make him available to people to do these interviews. As of now, I have not seen any of those run. So either they're embargoed for a later time, or they simply didn't happen, and he's not available. So again,
who can talk to
this is a
then?
very important clarifying step in a big event like this, where people have normal questions that they want to get answered, and they go to the person who has the information.
Which is the president of the company.
Who can clarify those. So again, if you just cut that channel off, again, people just have to make do with whatever you've given them, whether it's good enough or not.
Yeah, and back in the day, when we were doing this kind of stuff, when we had tough questions like this or tough issues, we had Reggie.
Yeah.
We would just get a Q&A together, make sure he's cool with it, like he's a very strong, obviously, spokesperson. And he can be the shield. Like, he can go out there. You don't have to get mad at the developers of Mario Kart because they're charging $80 for the game.
Don't yell at Treehouse Live.
Don't yell at Treehouse Live because it's not their fault. The game is $80 and you're mad. We're all mad. And Reggie will go out there and in a very authoritative way have that conversation with somebody, whether it's media, whether it's, something that we're putting on a social, whatever. He can be the person to have those tough conversations. That person does not exist anymore at Nintendo.
Or they're not allowed to exist in that capacity.
Because this will be a perfect opportunity for someone like Doug to kind of take the heat off of Treehouse Live, the development team, the game itself, and actually have a clarifying response.
And hopefully give people a bit more clarity on why everything is the way that it is.
Exactly.
But it's just not happening. It's very indicative, again, that muscle that they used to have has just kind of atrophied. If you don't use a muscle, it just goes away. And you lose it.
You lose the ability to use it.
And they have not used it in a long time, so they don't have it.
Right, exactly. So the other thing that we've been thinking about is, we are kind of one day from the Direct. We are still in the midst of this conversation as it continues to heat up and bubble, and whether or not more things will come out around it, we don't know that yet. They got another day of programming for Treehouse Live tomorrow. Are they leaving the comments on so people can shout in the comments about dropping the price?
And if they turn it off, again, that sends a message
you lose
too.
Either way.
Like, you saw this and you don't like it, but you're not going to do anything about it.
You're still not saying anything except for turning the comments off, which is very
you're just showing everybody that you're even more freaked out.
Yeah, and of course, the longer they wait to do nothing leads to more confusion and more misinformation from people that are just trying to piece things together. It leads to people becoming more mad because you haven't come out to tell them why things are the way they are.
It sounds like we're becoming we're falling into the dark side of the force. What did Yoda say? Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to this is what's happening to all of us. Right now. We're all becoming Darth Vader in the moment.
Oh no. The other thing is once these media events wrap up into this weekend, so in a mere 2 days, this event opens to the public.
Yes.
This Switch hands-on event is coming to global locations where regular people can come and play the system. And these regular people might have some questions.
Yes. For as much as people like to make fun of the media or whatever, they're sellouts or whatever, people at these events, you could just show up and to the hired staff who may not even work for Nintendo. Why is Mario Kart World $80? And that person can either freak out and say something like, "Oh, we can't talk about that. We don't know," or maybe they will say something, and that becomes the company response for why this is, and that's a catastrophe because they literally don't know. So either way, this can get a lot worse really fast now that you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people starting to cycle through these who have these very normal questions.
Yeah, exactly.
And want to talk to somebody. They want to understand.
Yeah, they want to be excited to play and experience these games, but they also want to make sure they can afford them.
Yes.
So they're going to be asking these questions,
right.
And if you don't have sort of the official, line or statement out there, you just risk opening yourself up to so much more misinformation. And the people that they hire for these events are not Nintendo
They don't even
employees.
work there, right.
They're hired staff to help demo the game. They can hand you a controller and tell you how to play the game, but they actually don't work for Nintendo. So,
but that can make them kind of a wild card, where it's most of the time, they're very well drilled of here's what you can talk about, here's what you can't, but I don't know. If
anything could happen.
If they meet the wrong persistent person who's really getting uppity, who knows what could happen?
Exactly.
It's not great. It's not great.
The last thing we'll say is, a lot of people are they're going to drop the price. So they're not, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to
drop the price.
I don't think they're going to drop the price right now.
No.
So in terms of anything becoming a different price prior to launch, I don't think that is a consideration.
Yeah, a pre-release price drop would be pretty unprecedented.
Yeah.
And I think from their view, again, we have 2+ months until this thing comes out.
Yeah.
We can, we know we need to change this. I'm sure they're hopefully thinking of some ways they can do that. Maybe this Mario Kart Direct is this huge, significant thing that they need to get through for people to understand it. They should probably think about doing some of that sooner than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But they know what's coming. We don't. That's the thing that they have that we don't.
They have stuff that, we call them like marketing levers that you can pull.
Right.
They have levers to pull, but they're again so out of practice on handling something like that they're just in like almost like a they say like, what's your fear response? Are you do you fight, flight, or freeze?
Yeah.
They're in the freeze zone
Yeah.
right now, so they need to get into the fight zone so they can start to get control back of this conversation, and also. For the benefit of all of us, they need to clarify a lot of this misinformation. They need to come out here and just tell us how much these things are going to cost. Be fair to your consumer. Tell them how much. Be transparent. Things are going to cost, so they can start. If they are excited about getting your thing in June, like I would love to start saving up money for my Switch 2 stuff. So I would love to know how much it's going to cost.
Right.
Can you just tell me, please? Anyways, I can't believe it that. This thing has just completely overshadowed sort of the excitement of this reveal. Coming out of the Direct yesterday, I was so hyped. The games look great. The games continue to look great. I watched the Treehouse live and turned the comments off on my side so I can enjoy the beautiful.
These games look really great.
The beautiful Mario Kart, gameplay. I loved what I saw of Donkey Kong. Got so excited about Metroid. Really, really unfortunate that this has kind of overshadowed all of that. So I do hope that Nintendo can come out and like right the ship a little bit. But
the clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking. Let us know in the comments what you think of all of this. Have you learned anything new from a reputable source that you can share with the rest of us? Because we're certainly on our own for a while until Nintendo can come out with the official stuff, right? Anyways, we're going to wrap it up for today. We'll be back with another video tomorrow.
Yes,
so
with
we'll
Steven.
see you then. Bye.
Bye.